Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. Today, I'm going to be talking with the constructive contrarian. I'm excited to welcome to the podcast Greg Crumpton, who is Vice President at ServiceLogic, founder, curator, and writer at DeepKnowledge, and host of, in my opinion, the best named podcast I've ever heard, which is the Straight Out of Crumpton podcast. Greg, welcome to our podcast, my podcast.
Well, Sarah, I am so glad to be here. I've just enjoyed learning about you, and we had a little chat a couple of weeks ago, and just really fun. And I'm excited about today. Good way to kick off the new year.
Yes, absolutely. No, I'm so happy to have you here. As you mentioned, we connected late last year, and we've had ourselves a couple good chats. And you part of what you shared with me, and then you kindly allowed me to ask a bunch of questions about, well, wait, how does this work, and how does this work? Is your story. So I'm hoping you can share that with our listeners. How you came up, what kind of progressed from that perspective. So on the HVAC side, but then also after that, if you don't mind talking a bit about DeepKnowledge and the Straight Out of Crumpton podcast and how those came to be as well, that would be great.
Now, I'm always glad to talk about it because, in fact, I was talking to a friend. I've got this weird thing going on. So I'm buying a vehicle from a guy who I sold a vehicle to that I bought new. So I'm buying it back from him and
Okay.
I'm restoring it.
Mhm.
So I'm in the midst of that. So we were talking about yesterday about how things trigger memories and
Mhm.
how items can be such a part of a story and how those memories then create that legacy sometimes that you want to carry forward. And, I never thought I'd be 61 years old and have two books published and be able to talk about them, but that's where we are. But a lot of that stuff came from real life
Mhm.
and those moments in time where I've got to capture this so that I can reflect on it and maybe even talk about it later. So looking
Mhm.
forward to that.
Yeah. So tell everyone from I guess from a core business perspective, how you made a living, how that came to be a part of ServiceLogic. Give a bit of that backstory for folks and talk a little bit about where that is today.
Well, I will start with the first ever job I had in HVAC, and that was while I was in utero because I'm a second generation air conditioning guy. So my dad worked for a great company in the Atlanta, Georgia market for years and years until he passed, actually. And I kind of grew up around that company, so I learned a lot,
Hmm.
I thought. And as I, excuse me, as I got out of high school, I knew what I wanted to do, which was to be an air conditioning mechanic. I just wanted to be a tradesman. That's what I'm cut out for. My family is chock full of educated people. My sister's a PhD, 4 point plus O kind of lady, and then here I am wearing Carhartts and work boots. So
Hmm.
different same household, different outcome, but both worked out well for us both, which kind of proves my point I like to talk about is college isn't for everybody
Hmm.
and the trades aren't for everybody, but find your niche and go that direction of what your strong suit is. But so I grew up at the company. And I went to when I got out of high school, went to a 4 year apprenticeship program with the United Association Local 72. I'm a proud alumni. And I learned a lot of stuff. I thought, I keep saying I thought because I was so young that I didn't know what I didn't know. And then I got out of apprenticeship school and I was working for that same company. And then I made a couple of moves around other companies within the industry. But like I went to work for York, which is now Johnson Controls, because I wanted to work for an OEM, a manufacturer.
Hmm.
I went to work for a small digital controls company because I wanted to learn how to run conduit and pull wire properly. I worked for a small mom and pop service company. all in the same union, all in the same metro Atlanta area. But my goal was, and this is what I explained to my father, who completely thought I had lost my mind because I was actually changing jobs,
Hmm.
which his generation did not
Right.
look favorably upon. But I wanted to make sure I knew what I wanted to do. So I did those things. I circled back to that original company where I started, worked my way back through the different positions, sales and project management and all the stuff. Eventually wound up being running a division. That's what moved me to the Carolinas
Hmm.
way back in 1997. Ran their operations up here, became a minority equity owner. So I started getting a little taste for business. I had to go back to school at night to learn accounting because I didn't know how to read a spreadsheet or
Hmm.
how to read a financial statement, P&L, or any of that. It was
Right.
foreign. So I learned all that. And then my wife and I, we went through this thing. I had a boss that we could do three more podcasts on him, but we won't. Um, it didn't work out well because different things happened. So I wound up saying I'll just leave the company because he was impeding my growth. And so we started our own company called
Mm.
Airtight Mechanical in 1999 in our garage, in our bonus room, bootstrapping. Um, did a little friends and family money gathering, to get us going. Eventually, we built that company with the help of some really, really high quality people. Um, we grew that company. We had 40 employees. And then in 2014, we sold that company, Airtight Mechanical, to ServiceLogic, where you see I actually got my shirt on today,
Hmm.
um, to where we became number 8 on their platform of companies they were acquiring.
Hmm.
So now we have 60. So
Hmm.
I've been there 11 years. I'm in such a great spot, Sarah. Um, it's a position that allows me to really get back to the industry.
Hmm.
I'm the only one at corporate with a lot of industry experience, so I get to kind of at least give voice to the industry through our corporate. We're a big company now, $3 billion in revenue.
Hmm.
But through it all, I've always stayed grounded with the technicians and the skilled trades workforce because that's where I grew up. And a lot of what I've done was driven by what I did in the field and what I saw being done to the field.
Hmm.
So I'll take a breath there. I know I said a lot at one time, but that's kind of the genesis of what got us to this point,
Yeah.
uh, being able to kind of jump off from here and go do some other cool stuff.
Yeah. Now, is it okay, Greg, if we share with folks some of where, I started asking you questions because when you have a business owner
Mhm.
that their company is then acquired by a firm, a larger firm, and it's not. Sometimes those folks stay on, sometimes they don't, right? But I started asking you a bunch of questions of like, so wait, like what happened next, right? Is it okay if we share with folks that there was a plan at some point for you to step away,
Yeah.
and how and why, more importantly, you ended up staying,
Yeah.
because what you found is that you have these great business leaders, these financially minded and strategically minded folks. They, though, have never been on the front lines or connected to the actual work in the way you have. So you ended up finding yourselves in this place where they realized, oh man, this Greg guy really, is plugged into a wealth of knowledge we don't have, and how can we kind of, you know, um, make this work in a mutually beneficial way? Do you mind sharing some of that?
No, I don't. And I don't want to sound braggadocious at all about it because I work with some really, really gifted people they just haven't ever turned wrenches or ran a mechanical company.
Sure.
I'm so some days I'm so I think I'm either jealous or envious, and I struggle which way it is. But I sometimes I sit here and go, my God, I wish I would have thought like that. But regardless, so they bought my company, and they already held a company in the Charlotte market where my company was located. So the plan was to merge those two companies into what is now called Airtight, which was my company, and Facilitech, which was the existing company. And we came up with a really cool name called Airtight Facilitech. Really crafty, I know.
Hmm.
But so there was a plan in place where I was leaving. I had other stuff I planned to go do. They had a gentleman that they were bringing in from one of our Raleigh, North Carolina operations to work with the existing guy at Facilitech, who was also the former owner. Well, day one, those two instantaneously had a oil and water type reaction to each other, and it never was harmonious. I mean, they couldn't even fake it, like
Hmm.
for zero time. Things got really out of hand with, and I don't want to over dramatize it, but there were people leaving the company, customers were leaving the company because nobody felt like there was the cohesiveness to
Hmm.
keeping the thing grounded and kind of pulled together. So my boss, my former boss, who's now retired, our CEO, asked me, "Hey, could you come back and just kind of go over there, spend some time, and kind of bring some harmony back to the organization?" So I did, and we kind of got everything somewhat settled. One guy wound up leaving. A couple of the not very nice people left the organization because they weren't part of my organization, and they did not adapt well to change. So
Hmm.
they wound up leaving. So we kind of got the thing, calmed down, and then my time was up, my 6 months or whatever we had talked about. And so I was, thinking, okay, I'm going to do uh, whatever it was I was supposed to be doing.
Hmm.
And so Craig, our old CEO, said, why don't you just stay with us?" And I'm like, "Okay, what will I do?" And he said, basically, "I don't know, but we'll figure that out as we go. You just ought to hang out with us and help in these, little flare-ups or what have you."
Yeah.
So that was 11 years ago. So I'm now working on my 12th year of a 6-month commitment.
Hmm.
And I really, really enjoy working for ServiceLogic because we buy, that's our mission is ServiceLogic buys, acquires very high
Hmm.
performing, profitable and well-run companies. Uh, the thing that we really work hard is not to change those companies that we buy. Excuse me. And so we don't do many mergers anymore.
Hmm.
We found that, and my deal was just, it was weird. It was a one-off deal. It just seemed right at the time, looked great on paper. Unfortunately, it did not work as well as we thought it would on paper. Having said that, the companies that we do acquire, we have had huge success because what has worked well is we acquire the company, the former owner or owners, plural, stay as president, chairman, whatever role is proper, and they continue to run the company like they used to run it because you cannot replace or displace that culture that they built at their company. Now, this green swish under our name is indicative of a ServiceLogic company. So we have
Hmm.
60 or so brands, but they all have the green swish under them.
Hmm.
That local name in white is what represents the local market. Toll and Mechanical, Engineered Cooling, some of these great companies that we have. But the green swish is the tie back to corporate,
Hmm.
which is dang near a dotted line because we're not very hardcore at what you must do.
Yeah.
because we have learned the value is what happens locally.
Yeah.
So
That makes sense. And I think what was really interesting to me about this story is, service is not what it was when you were turning wrenches. It has changed. At least a lot of factors have changed. One of
absolutely.
which just being the fact that there are these private equity firms that are interested in, taking ownership of organizations, plus a whole host of other things, right? But I think what I find really interesting about this relationship is this idea of mutual respect, right? And understanding that in today's modern world, right, success requires different skills and knowledge than you maybe had at one point in 1999, right? But it also requires this core foundation of what good service is, which is really tough to truly understand from a corporate office when you've never done the job, when you've never, run a company like that, when you haven't engaged with customers in their time of need to understand what they value most, et cetera. So this idea that ServiceLogic had this recognition when things started going awry to say, Greg, we really, this world better than we do. Can you come in and help us? That takes, we were talking about this before we started recording. You have to let go of your ego. It can't be, well, we run the show and we know everything. Then you're not going to be able to solve some of these problems that are out of your core competency, right? And you can come in and say, wow, I really respect these people. And I wish I would have had some of the ideas they had. But you find this relationship where you are respecting and leveraging each other's strengths to
Absolutely.
not only your own mutual benefit, but more importantly, the benefit of the workforce, the benefit of the customers. And I think there's a lot of lessons in that for not only companies that are acquisition led, but even really large organizations. Sometimes just in really large organizations, there's this friction because everyone's trying to protect their own role more so than they are trying to solve problems or trying to look for how to partner. And so I think it's really cool that you came back for 6 months and you're here 12 years later. I think it's a testament to that ability on both sides to know where your strengths lie, but also know where you need support. And leadership itself has changed so much in the last 15 years to where leaders used to be defined as the go-to person, the holder of answers. And in today's landscape, no one person can be that. A good leader is someone who recognizes the value they bring, which often is a lot of connecting dots and understanding different perspectives and being curious and listening well, and then bringing together teams with strong skills to do, what is just no longer one person's job. Um,
There, so two things pop for me on that. So first of all, I want to explain ServiceLogic. I said we're a $3 billion company, 9,000 people in North America. The corporate team is 35 people.
mhm.
So everything else is operationally based at the local business unit by design,
Yeah.
because everything that you said points to local operators knowing their market, knowing their niche. Yes, we're all in the air conditioning business, but we have 60 ways thus far of doing it right.
Mhm.
Like there's not one way. Second thing, I just finished a book last night by a fellow named John Levy, Levy, and it spawned out of the emotional intelligence realm, and it's basically EQ for teams.
Mhm.
And he talked so much in that book about those points you just said.
Mhm.
Yes, historical leadership, and he defines many different types. But it really comes down to we're the boss and we know what's best, and here's what we're going to go do. And you've got frontline workers going, that's not cool, that won't work. And then
Mhm.
we in the ivory towers go, oh yeah, we're good, just do it, and then and hush, basically. And then the modern, I say modern, I don't even know what that means. I think of George Jetson when I say that, but the current uh, thought leaders make us think, and I've had so many good conversations in the last 3 weeks. I'm so excited about this, of what we are doing now and how it is so different than it was even 10, 12 years ago
Mhm.
in the way that we're communicating with our teams, how we're building our teams, and to your point, recognizing our strengths and and I don't know if admitting's the right word, but not being ashamed of our weaknesses by
Yeah.
saying, like me, I suck at Excel spreadsheets.
Mhm.
I wish I was better at it, but I'm 61 years old. I don't want to spend 5 years getting really good at something that I can ask Grok to do in two
Mhm.
minutes.
Right.
So I'm trying to like say, okay, I'm weak at this, and I know I need help with it, and I'm not ashamed.
Mhm.
Um, and shame is such a heavy word, and but it's real
Yeah.
because if you can't be truthful about what you need help with, you're so busy hiding that, and you can call it imposter syndrome, and however deep you want to dig on that topic. But basically, you're doing a bunch of crap that keeps you from doing the crap you're good at.
Right.
I mean, and that's a harsh way of saying it, but it's true. If
Mhm.
you're worried about, oh, so my boss is a guy named Tom Padilla, and if I hid my Excel work order or spreadsheet weakness from him, that would be stupid because he's probably got it figured out.
Mhm.
But it would take away from the good stuff that I am able to bring to the team. So I don't have to hide it. I just say,
Yeah.
Tom, I suck at spreadsheets. Can we get one of these really smart cats to do it? Or let me just use Grok and I'll
Right.
purge it out here.
And I
So,
think, Greg, I think that fear that exists in many people is a leftover result of that authoritarian type leadership era
yeah,
where everyone that wanted to succeed, that wanted to progress, you had to be the knower and doer of all. And so you have this fear of, well, if I don't know this piece, right? And it in today's landscape, like I said, knowing and doing it all isn't possible. So you figure out what you are really good at. To your point, you figure out how to get comfortable being honest about it and how to fill the gaps. And that's who today progresses. But I wanted to go back to a point you made about ServiceLogic's corporate team being 35 people in a company that is not, you said 9,000?
hmm
And what I wanted to point out, this is I think a valid point for folks, whether we're talking about a PE and then, family of companies, whether we're talking about a corporate brand that goes to market service-wise with a bunch of partners, or whether we're talking about a big company of leaders thinking about their teams, okay? Because all of the points we're talking about right now are interconnected in that there's this way of working that's tied back to what leadership used to look like that today's talent does not relate to. No one is just going to come punch in and do what they're told and shut up and punch out for 20 years at a time anymore. And we need to catch up to what works today. And I think a lot of companies, businesses, conglomerates are still really struggling with this. And it comes down to in that era, one of the core characteristics was control.
yeah.
It was fear-based, it was control-based, right? Like as a leader, if I don't know everything and I don't have my hands on everything and I'm not controlling it, then it won't work. They won't do what they're supposed to. And so what you were saying about the makeup of ServiceLogic's corporate team and all of its companies made me think of a podcast I did maybe a year or two ago with Whirlpool. They made a decision a while back, a strategic decision to deliver all service through third parties. None of it is done with their own workforce any longer. And they've had really good success. This is a model that a lot of organizations struggle with because the questions all default back to this fear. If it's not our workforce, how do we know that they will deliver the customer experience we want? How do I know that they'll be as efficient as we need them to be? How do I know, et cetera, et cetera? What the woman in this interview said that just captured it really well was if our goal is to control our partners, then that's what the problem is. Because if we're trying to control them, we don't respect what they're capable of doing, what they bring to the table. It shouldn't be a control and do relationship. It should be a trust and respect relationship, right? And that's why what I think is interesting about your story, that mutual respect that exists, as you just mentioned, that's just not between you and the people that brought you back in to help out. It's represented from the corporate team to all 60 of those companies. And I think that loosening of the reins, getting comfortable understanding that you don't have to control everything to build success. You need to, like you said, find people that are doing it well already, trust them, enable them, partner with them, have that mutual respect, and then see what happens. I say all of this because I see the same dynamic play out in large organizations with individual leaders trying to micromanage teams and then wondering why they leave to go somewhere else because people don't want to work like that anymore. So it's just really, really interesting. What I want to talk about, sorry, go ahead.
No, so as large as we are, I see these microcosms of everything you just explained happening because
Hmm.
when you have 9,000 people, you have 9,000 people, and
Hmm.
therefore you have 9,000 brains working of what's good, what's not good. Just on the piece of the third party service partnership, because we do some of that, and I've done some of that in my career. I really feel like it's a matter of setting expectations on that instead of dictation.
Hmm.
If I'm servicing Whirlpool equipment, I should say to Whirlpool as a service partner, what is the experience you want me to deliver?
Hmm.
Then I go back and me and my team, we sit in a room and we say, okay, here's what we're capable of delivering. How does that measure up against the expectations? And then we go back to Whirlpool and say, we're really good on 1 through 8. We've got to
Hmm.
figure out 9. How would you like us to address the fact that we can't carry all the parts that a factory person would because we're working on multiple brands of equipment?
Hmm.
That to me is how you get to really good service because you already have agreed on, call it, 80, 90% of the things. How do we work on the anomalies? How do we work
Hmm.
on the 20% that's not easy?
Right.
And I think a lot of people get stuck on the 80, like, well, you got
Hmm.
to sign in, you got to call me, and we're going to look at your GPS and all that. Well, if we're doing all that, you're not a partner. I'm a vendor at that
Right.
point. And there's a hell of a difference in that and just in the amount of respect we show each other. So that's how I looked at that
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. I want to get to the word that I picked for the title of this because this is something you call yourself, and it's something that I immediately identified with as well, which is you refer to yourself as a contrarian. Okay. And so, what I would love to hear from you is um, why do you proudly claim that adjective? And where has it served you well? And what have you learned about where it can cross lines and actually become something that is, not because it's unpopular. That's kind of within the definition of the word, right? But I've learned at least that I am often a contrarian. And I think that in the corporate world, there is not only room for that, but a real need. I've
Absolutely.
also learned about myself ways where I have allowed that to be at my detriment rather than something that is actually valuable to me or to whomever I'm interacting with. So what are your thoughts on that badge and how to wield it intentionally?
So I start with the fact that a lot of people look at that word with negative connotations associated with it. I don't. I
Hmm.
look at it because I feel like I'm the 3-year-old that's stuck in the why mode.
Hmm.
Why, mommy? Because it's by nature, I'm curious.
Hmm.
By nature, I'm not satisfied with status quo. By nature, I can't go with the mindset of good enough.
Hmm.
I'm always striving. I have a tattoo that says Kaizen, which means
Hmm.
continuous improvement. So it's just in my DNA to dig deeper. So if somebody presents a opportunity and or a challenge or both and says, this is what we're going to do, my natural reaction is, and it's not meant in a disrespectful way, is why?
Hmm.
Why have we settled on this approach? And you're telling 25 people this is how we're going to do it. Maybe that there's some um, good thoughts in the room that we could kind of vet out. Like if we take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, we
Hmm.
may can come up with a much better plan than just here you go execute.
Hmm.
So, where that has served me well is I can think back when I was a young sales guy at the company in Atlanta. Um, they did a lot of new installation work of new high-rise buildings, hotels, data centers, hospitals. My department was responsible for selling preventive maintenance.
Hmm.
So we would build the building, give it to the owner, and then my crew, my company, my peers, we would go and try to sell maintenance. So one day I just said, why are we not doing this as part of the installation? Give them some kind of documentation to say we're taking care of your equipment, even under warranty, and we want to live with it forever. So that evolved into me uh, writing a purchase order to my construction peers, taking over their maintenance, or I'm sorry, taking over their warranty by those warranty dollars, and having a maintenance contract out of the gate day one. So everybody kind of looked at me like I was squirrely until they saw the numbers and the customer retention, because historically we would win back like 50% of what we
Hmm.
built. Well, I was having like 85, 90% success ratio of keeping those customers from day one. So
Hmm.
that kind of started me thinking like, okay, this is okay. This is kind of okay. And then I go back further when I was a technician. I'm the guy that was at the classes at night that were being held. I was given my own time to go educate myself and learn and look at different products and controls uh, and one thing came up where, and my father of all people was my boss at this time, and he said something simple. Why won't you wear the company provided uniform pants we give you? And I said, because they're uncomfortable. And I can't do my best work if I'm sitting here worrying about my pants on my knees or, up here on
Hmm.
granddaddy's level. And he said, are pants really that big of a deal? And I said, 100%.
Hmm.
So that just showed me that it's okay to be different as long as I felt like there was a valid reason without pushing the envelope too hard.
Yeah.
Now, where does it want to sneak up and bite you? Um, and I think that's different for all of us.
Hmm.
And it can be situational depending upon who you're presenting and I never have been a complainer, but who am I bringing stuff to say, we've got to solve this. Do
Hmm.
you want to help or do you want me to do it? And um, I've I've crossed the line before where I've been told you're out of line,
Hmm.
sit down and shut up. But I've also been, you know what? That's a great way to look at that. We should work on this together. I think maturity
Hmm.
helped me when I could start to my EQ education level was rising and I could read the situation a little bit better.
Hmm.
So that's why I think it's so important that we understand humans and human reaction because maybe there was nothing flinching in my boss's body except that one vein. And when I saw it in his neck, I knew I was getting a little bit too close to the edge.
Hmm.
Uh, but I really think, Sarah, it comes down to intent.
Yeah.
If you are a proven entity that has historically done good things for the right reasons to help people, you get a lot of grace
Hmm.
because even when you're off base or out of line or out over your skis or too big for your britches or whatever acronym or whatever saying you want to put on it, you get a lot of grace if you've proven that you're there for the right reason.
Hmm.
At least that's been my experience. But
Yeah.
uh, it's a learned behavior,
Yeah. I think
and
it
you're
depends a
continuously
lot.
learning.
Yeah, I think I we just published a podcast with Adam Gloss, who's the COO of Impel, and he one of the things we were talking about is how he's learned over his career to prioritize to understand himself and find companies, cultures, roles, ways of working that are aligned with who he is and what he needs, right? And so I say all of that because we had an interesting conversation about culture, right? And company culture and the importance of finding one that is a fit. And I do think that there are cultures that have very little space for curiosity,
Oh,
asking hard questions, the contrarian viewpoint. And I think that's unfortunate. I think one of the things I've learned, because for me it is very similar to what you described. It is always well intentioned. I am just built in a way to, I think, asking questions and having discussions to reflect on, well, why this or why this way, or have you thought about this, or have we, looked into that? It's a way to vet decisions and or improve them, right? I think to your point, it's just people that are just taking orders and maintaining the status quo. They're not improving upon what that is. So what I've learned though is one, there are cultures that do not want that, and those are not your place because you will quite literally kill yourself trying to make a difference somewhere that your skills are not valued, right? So that's one. Two is when you have that mindset, when you see those opportunities and you're excited about how things could be better, or it's it's hard to temper that, right? It's hard to accept that you need to focus on the next thing and then the next thing, that you can't just do it all at once, right? Like
that's
you,
right.
I have this tendency to see these opportunities and I want to help everywhere. And I just can't do that, right? But I think the curiosity in you came to mind when you were talking about your path of, so I went here and I tried this and I went here and I tried this, and your dad kind of looking at you thinking like, that's not how you do it. You pick a
Right.
job, you stay, you get good at it, you grow, what have you. To me, it's curiosity. You want to learn the different aspects. You want to understand how it works. You want to figure out for yourself what is the right fit, what is the best role, etc. And I think it's a really it's a great skill, but to your point, it takes some practice to
Sure.
use it in the right way. How have you, well, I guess, have you had in your leadership roles, people that were contrarian to you, and how has that felt like to be on the receiving end, and how do you kind of um, receive that?
Well, so over the last really 3 or 4 years, I've spent a lot of time on generational differences in the workplace because
Mm-hmm.
right now we have 5 generations in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it comes down to messaging. Like if I want to give a message to a 22-year-old and I want to give a message to a 42-year-old and I want to give a message to the 62-year-old, same message, I
Mm-hmm.
have to deliver it properly in 3 different ways. So I think about that a lot. Um, and back to my father and me, I think that was foretelling of what's coming and where we are now
Mm-hmm.
because he had never seen it before. His peers, you worked for the 30-year watch.
Yeah.
Um, my generation, I'm the last year of a baby boomer, so I'm a little more X, but we started experimenting with, I don't know if I have to get the 30-year watch. I might need a 15-year watch, maybe
Mm-hmm.
two of them in silver. So we started kind of messing around. And I think that was a great prerequisite of learning for where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
We had and I know getting off topic of your question, but I think it's pretty important uh, point that last week we had a meeting in Charlotte of our talent development of how we are recruiting, retaining, retraining, and all the things that come down to culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of that conversation came down to how do we that are 65 down to call it 35 working to understand the needs of the 22-year-old so that we can provide a workplace where they can grow, where they can learn, where they see a roadmap. And if they do all this, be able to show them what that looks like and where they can end up if they so choose to,
Mm-hmm.
because it is a choice to stay with the company this day and age. So I just felt like that was super important for us as a group to hear. And it just reconfirmed everything I've been working on for the last several years. Now, I will ask you again, what was your primary question? Because I was so freaking intrigued by the generational component of that I lost it.
Yeah, so I was asking if you have been on the receiving end
Oh yeah,
of
yeah.
a similarly,
Yeah,
contrarian thinker,
sure.
and how have you, received that? Like
Yeah.
what's your
So
experience been there?
um, when that happened to me early in my career, I thought, how dare you?
Yeah.
And now I didn't say that out loud. That was my ego talking. Like,
Hmm.
um, I know what I'm doing here. Just go along with the program. And then I think as I matured, I thought, dang, that's a pretty good idea. Let's talk about that further. And I think now I'm at the point where what are your guys' ideas? And let me hear those before I
Hmm.
even espouse anything, because I feel like that, and you and I talked about it before we hit record. We don't have to be involved in everything.
Hmm.
We can be involved in the things that we add value to, and not just because I've got HVAC initials behind my name. I don't have to be involved in everything HVAC related.
Hmm.
There are really, really smart, dedicated, complicated, inquisitive minded people that are running that meeting or that program or that job. Let them do their job. Stay out of the way. My job is to cut down trees, mow the lawn, move the hurdles,
Mm-hmm.
support, support, support. I was on a webinar this morning with a guy named Steve Thomas, who I don't know if you know Steve, but great guy. He's well known in my industry for
Mm-hmm.
speaking to our industry groups. Um, and he says, this is leadership is not that hard if you understand leadership versus manager versus
Mm-hmm.
supervisor, all that. And his quote was, um, love people and show the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote that down because it really hit me. And his love is the agape style love, not romantic, but
Right.
take care of your people and show the way. Be
Mm-hmm.
up front, get the machete and clear it for these cats and ladies coming behind you because they're really good at what they do.
Yeah.
And if you get the heck out of the way and remove a hurdle or a burden or a smooth out a bump in the road, it makes their deal flow. And that's where we've got to get comfortable with as senior leaders
Mm-hmm.
of understanding we don't have to do. Our job is to support, nurture, grow, spread love. And I don't want to sound like I'm kumbaya in here, but
Mm-hmm.
hug people
Yeah.
figuratively and in some cases, like me, literally,
Mm-hmm.
um, because that connection is what builds that culture, which makes everything else that we've talked about flow.
Yeah. Absolutely.